When Samuel Martin returned, the earth no longer remembered his name. The valley was silent. Only the wind moved, carrying the scent of ash that never faded. They said nothing survived here, that the fire had swallowed everything, leaving only bones of trees and ghosts of memories. But Samuel came anyway. Not for hope. Not for forgiveness. He came because something in him refused to stay buried. The old truck groaned up the broken road, its tires crunching over crusted ash. The landscape stretched endless, grey, lifeless, cold. Where once fields had waved golden in the sun, there was only the colour of ruin. The sky hung low and pale, the kind of sky that remembers pain. He stopped where the gate used to be. There was nothing left, no fence, no path, no laughter. Only the hollow sound of wind whistling through what had once been home. He stepped out. The ash swallowed his boots, soft as dust from forgotten years. Every step left a deep print, as if the ground tried to hold him, then let go. He looked around, and for a moment, time folded. He could see it all again. The orchard in bloom. The wooden porch with his wife calling him for supper. The hum of bees. The creak of the old windmill turning in the breeze. Then he blinked. And the vision was gone. Only silence remained. He was 71 now. The years had carved him thin, but not small. His hands still strong, his back still straight. His wife, Anna, had passed last winter. Quietly, like a candle burning itself out. Since then, the world had felt too clean, too new, too far from the soil that raised him. He had promised never to return. He'd told himself this land was dead, and the past with it. But when he signed the papers to sell it, something inside him twisted. He couldn't do it. He couldn't let strangers take what generations of Martins had bled for. So he came back, to say goodbye, or maybe to remember who he was. The house was gone. Only a few stones marked where it had stood. The barn lay in a heap of rusted iron and charcoal. The windmill, once proud, had collapsed beside the old well, bent, broken, forgotten. He walked toward it. The well. The heart of the farm. He had drawn from it every morning of his youth, the coldest, sweetest water in the valley. Now it was just a ring of black stones, half buried in ash. The wooden cover had burned away long ago. Samuel knelt beside it, brushed the soot away with trembling fingers. The stones beneath were still warm, as if they remembered the fire. He leaned over and looked down. Nothing but darkness. He waited, listening, hoping for a sound, even a whisper of what once was. But there was only silence. Still, something in him stirred. A pull. A whisper too soft to be heard, but too strong to ignore. He began clearing debris, piece by piece. Broken wood. Charred stone. Dust that stung his throat. The work was slow, clumsy, painful. But he kept going. Each handful of ash he threw aside felt like peeling away the years. He wasn't sure why he did it. He only knew he had to. By the time the sun sank behind the hills, his hands were black, his breath heavy. The mouth of the well stood open again, a hollow circle staring back at him. He leaned close, listened, and then, a sound, so faint he thought it might be his imagination. A whisper, a drop, water, still there, waiting. Samuel froze. The world seemed to hold its breath with him. He smiled, a small, trembling thing, and whispered to the earth, "You're still alive." He stayed there until the stars came out, their cold light glimmering over the ruins. And for the first time in 20 years, the valley wasn't silent anymore. The morning came grey and cold. Mist crawled through the valley like a living thing. Samuel Martin woke in the cab of his truck, his body stiff, his breath white in the air. He didn't know why he'd stayed. He'd meant to leave after one night. Sell the land. Forget it forever. But something in the darkness had changed him. The sound of that single drop of water still echoed in his chest. He stepped out. The ground crunched beneath his boots. Ash shifted like memory underfoot. The air smelled faintly different, sharper, cleaner, alive. He walked to the well. Its black stones glistened faintly with dew. He leaned over the rim again. Silence. Then, another sound. A soft, hollow echo. Not his imagination this time. He found an old rope in the back of his truck, tied it to a rusted bucket, and lowered it carefully into the darkness. The rope scraped over the stone, whispering like an old song. Then the sound came, splash. Samuel froze. For a heartbeat, he couldn't breathe. Then he pulled the rope back up, hand over hand, slow and trembling. The bucket rose glistening in the pale light, droplets spilling down its sides like glass beads. He stared at it as if it were a miracle. Because it was. Water. Cool. Clear. Alive. He lifted it to his lips and drank. The taste hit him with memories. Mornings before sunrise, his father's laugh, Anna's hands passing him a cup at breakfast. He felt it spread through him like warmth in winter. When he looked down again, he noticed something strange. The ground near the well was darker than before. Damp. Soft. He knelt, touched it with his fingers, and saw, just beyond the edge of his hand, the tiniest shoots of green pushing through the ash. Fragile blades of grass trembling in the breeze. He stared at them for a long time. Then he laughed, quietly at first, then louder. It wasn't madness. It was relief. The valley was waking up. By noon, clouds began to gather over the hills. At first, Samuel thought it was smoke again. But it wasn't. It was rain. A single drop hit his hand. Then another. Then 1,000 more. Soft, steady, relentless. He stood there in the open, face tilted to the sky, the cold water running down his cheeks, mixing with the dirt and the tears he didn't realize he'd shed. The rain turned the ash to silver mud. It darkened the earth until it looked almost fertile again. The smell that rose from the ground was rich. Soil, stone, memory. He whispered, "You never died, did you?" All around him, the land seemed to breathe. The dead trees bent slightly, their blackened branches dripping. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of wet grass. It was as if the valley had waited for him to return before choosing to live again. That night, Samuel built a small fire from what dry wood he could find. He sat beside the well, staring into the flames as the rain eased to a drizzle. The water's reflection flickered faintly, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. For the first time in decades, he felt something move inside him, not just hope, but belonging. This was where he was meant to be. The land had called him back, and he had answered. He leaned back against the stone rim, eyes half closed, listening to the quiet rhythm of drops falling into the well. Each one sounded like a promise. And when he finally fell asleep beneath the stars, the valley whispered around him. Alive. Alive again. The valley had changed. Only days had passed, yet everything felt different. The air smelled of rain, not ash. The ground near the well pulsed with quiet life, soft, dark, damp. Samuel Martin worked from dawn to dusk. Not for money. Not for anyone. For the land itself. Each morning, he cleared more debris, broken beams, rusted tools, the black bones of what once had been his barn. He built a small shelter beside the well from the fallen wood. Nothing fancy. Just enough to sleep, to think, to stay. At times he caught himself talking to the valley. To the soil. To Anna. Maybe they all listened. One afternoon, while moving charred stones, he struck something solid beneath the earth. A sound different from rock, hollow, deliberate. He knelt, brushed away the dust, and uncovered a slab of dark stone. Flat. Perfectly cut. Its surface marked with a faint carving, a wave crossed by an arrow. He frowned. He had seen that symbol before, carved above the old barn door when he was a boy. His father had called it the sign of flow, but never explained. Samuel ran his fingers across the grooves. Cold stone. Too smooth to be nature's work. He tapped the edge. The echo came back hollow. There was something beneath. He fetched a crowbar from the truck, wedged it under the edge, and pushed. The slab resisted at first, then shifted with a heavy groan. Dust rose. A smell of damp air drifted upward, cool, old, alive. Beneath the stone yawned a narrow shaft, lined with fitted rocks, slick with moisture. He lowered his lantern, its flame flickering in the draught. Below, a shimmer. Water. Not a well. A tunnel. Samuel hesitated only a moment before climbing down. His boots met wet stone. The air was thick with the scent of earth and age. The passage stretched forward, narrow, echoing. A thin stream of water flowed along its base, whispering as it moved deeper into the dark. He followed it, lantern held high. The walls glistened. At times, he thought he heard a pulse, not his heartbeat, but something slower, older. The heartbeat of the land. After some distance, the tunnel opened into a small chamber. The walls were carved with lines and shapes, simple but purposeful. He stepped closer, brushing the soot from one engraving. It was a map. The valley, the hills, the fields. Lines like veins ran through it, all leading to the place where he stood. At the bottom, the same symbol, the wave and the arrow. He realized then what this was. Not a mine, not a hiding place. A system, an underground network, built to guide the flow of water through the valley. Someone had made this, generations ago. Someone who knew how to make the earth breathe. He set the lantern down, his hands trembling. In a small alcove beside the wall, he found a rusted tin box. Inside, pages. Old, damp, ink faded, but still legible. He carried them to the surface, his heart pounding. In daylight, he unfolded them. The handwriting was firm, proud, familiar. He had seen it before, in the family Bible his father once kept. His great-grandfather's. Samuel read the first line aloud. The well is the heart. If the heart endures, the valley will live again. He turned the pages. Diagrams. Notes about underground channels, pressure, and flow. About a system designed to carry life where drought once ruled. But near the end, the words darkened. They have found out. They want to own what cannot be owned. If they return with fire, bury it deep. Samuel stopped reading. His throat dry. His hand shaking. The fire. The one that destroyed everything. It hadn't been an accident. It had been protection. A sacrifice to hide what his ancestors had built. He looked toward the well. Its stones shimmered in the sunlight, wet and steady. For the first time, he understood. The water hadn't just returned. It had been waiting. Waiting for someone who remembered. He whispered to the wind, "Grandfather, I found it." The valley said nothing. But somewhere beneath his feet, the water moved, as if it heard him. The weeks passed quietly. Too quietly. The valley no longer mourned. It worked. Grass thickened near the well, insects hummed in the evenings, and water whispered softly through the shallow trenches Samuel had cleared. Life had returned. But peace, he knew, never lasts forever. The first strangers came one bright morning. A pair of men in clean suits, their horses too fine for country roads. They introduced themselves as representatives of the Meridian Development Company. Their smiles were smooth, their words rehearsed. "Mr. Martin," the taller one said, "we've heard about your well. Quite the miracle. We'd like to discuss an opportunity, for both of us." Samuel said nothing. The man continued. "You see, our company specializes in land restoration, water management, renewable energy, that sort of thing. We could take this valley and make it bloom again. Together." Samuel's voice was calm, but heavy. "It's already blooming." The shorter man laughed politely. "Yes, but imagine the scale we could achieve with our technology. Reservoirs, pipelines, turbines. Your well could serve half the county." "I'm not selling," Samuel said. Silence. The taller one studied him, eyes sharp behind the smile. "You might reconsider once you hear our offer. There's more money in this valley than you think." Samuel met his gaze. "There's more life here than you understand." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the men nodded, tipped their hats, and rode away. But their dust lingered in the air like a warning. That night, Samuel couldn't sleep. He sat by the fire, listening to the wind hum through the half-rebuilt barn. He thought of his great-grandfather's words. If they return with fire, bury it deep. He had dismissed it as old fear. Now, it felt like prophecy. Days passed. The men did not return, but their shadow remained. He found footprints near the northern fence. A gate left open. Once, a lantern's flicker on the distant ridge. He told himself it was nothing. He knew it wasn't. Then came the smell. Smoke. Faint at first, the ghost of a campfire on the wind. By nightfall, the sky to the west glowed red. He ran. His old legs carried him faster than they had in years. The ridge was burning. Flames raced downhill, devouring the dry grass, snapping at the air like wild beasts. "No," he whispered. "Not again." He reached the barn, untied the mule, shouted at the chickens until they scattered toward the clearing near the well. Then he grabbed his shovel, his bucket, his top. His hands moved by memory. The same fight, reborn. The fire roared. Wind howled. The valley trembled under its fury. Ash swirled in the air like black snow. He filled the bucket, threw water again and again, the steam rising around him. The flames hissed, snarled, refused to die. His throat burned, his skin stung, but he didn't stop. Then headlights appeared through the smoke. Harris, his old neighbor, and 2 other men. They jumped from their truck, shouting his name. Together they fought, beating the fire with soaked burlap, digging trenches to slow the spread. 4 hours, they battled the inferno. And then something strange happened. The flames reached the circle around the well, and stopped. The wet earth shimmered faintly in the firelight. The air above it trembled. The fire curved around the water's reach, refusing to cross. Harris looked at Samuel, eyes wide. What in God's name? Samuel didn't answer. He just whispered, "The land remembers." When dawn came, the valley lay under a veil of smoke. Black hills, grey air, silence. But the heart of the farm still stood. The barn, the well, the fields closest to the water, untouched. They had survived. The men called it a miracle. The townspeople would say later that rain must have fallen in just the right place. But Samuel knew better. It wasn't luck. It wasn't chance. It was the land defending itself. The fire had come again, and failed. Because this time, the earth was awake. Autumn crept into the valley quietly. The air cooled. The hills, once black and scorched, softened under a thin veil of green. Even the trees that had been nothing but charred skeletons began to show tiny buds at the tips of their brittle branches. The land was healing, slowly, stubbornly, just like him. Samuel Martin moved with the rhythm of the earth now. Each morning he walked the fence line, boots sinking into dark, damp soil. The ground that had burned now felt alive underfoot, warm, rich, full of breath. Ash had become nourishment. Death had become life. The townsfolk spoke of him in whispers. Some called him blessed. Others said the land itself had chosen him. He didn't care. He had stopped listening to people. He listened only to the ground. Still, one truth haunted him. The fire had not been an accident. Not then, not now. It was history repeating itself. Greed returning in new clothes. Late one evening, he sat at the old table inside the half-rebuilt farmhouse, sorting through the papers he had found beneath the stone chamber. Among the blueprints and sketches, a folded note slipped free. The handwriting was different, sharper, rushed. He unfolded it carefully. They know about the channels. They'll come for it when the harvest fails again. Hide the entrance. Burn what you must. The words chilled him. The first fire, his great-grandfather's fire, had been no tragedy. It had been a choice. A sacrifice. The man had burned his own land to protect what was hidden beneath, the underground network, the lifeblood of the valley. Samuel sat in silence, the note trembling in his hand. He imagined that night, generations ago, his great-grandfather standing at the edge of the flames, watching everything he loved burn, knowing it was the only way to save it. And now, all these years later, the same blood flowed through his veins. The same choice waited at his door. At dawn, he returned to the stone passage below the barn. The air inside was damp and cold, filled with the smell of iron and earth. He carried a lantern, its glow trembling against the wet walls. The carving stared back at him, the wave and the arrow, the symbol of flow, of movement, of life refusing to stop. Deeper inside, he found the sealed vault again. The great iron pipe still rose from the ground, the veins of the system branching out into the unseen distance. He placed his hand against the cold metal. It thrummed faintly, alive. The water still moved. Beside the pipe sat the wooden chest. He opened it one last time. The papers inside were old but dry now. Blueprints, maps, letters. A photograph slipped loose and fell at his feet. 2 men. His great-grandfather, and another. A stranger with a dark suit and a badge that read Meridian. Samuel's breath caught. So it was true. The same company, the same hunger, the same lie reborn across generations. The enemy never left. It just changed its name. He gathered the papers, sealed them back into the chest, and carried it to the surface. By sunset, he had buried it beneath the oak tree he'd planted near the house. Some knowledge, he decided, wasn't meant to be used, not yet. The land would keep its secrets until it found another soul willing to protect them. That night, the air was still. The well shimmered under the stars, its surface silver and endless. Samuel knelt beside it, dipped his hand into the cool water, and whispered, "Thank you." The sound of water echoed back, soft, deep, eternal. It was as if the earth itself answered. He stood, his shadow stretching long across the fields. The valley lay before him, alive again. Wheat swayed like gold under the faint wind. The barn stood proud. And the house, though scarred, glowed with warm light from the hearth. He smiled. Not with joy, but with peace. For the first time in decades, he felt whole. He knew now that this land wasn't just his inheritance. It was his promise. Tomorrow, he would plant more trees. Tomorrow, the valley would live again. And even after he was gone, the water would keep flowing through its secret veins, whispering the same story it had told for generations. A story of fire, of rebirth, of memory, because water never forgets. And the land, once burned, had learned to breathe again. Final narrator line, outro. This isn't the end. It's the beginning. Share this story with someone who still believes in second chances.